She was just a cleaning lady in the hangar, or so everyone thought. But when a billionaire mocked her in front of his laughing friends, she calmly walked toward the private jet. And within minutes, the world discovered a secret that would shatter his empire forever. The evening sky above New York was painted in amber and violet, the last rays of the September sun slipping behind the skyline of Manhattan. At Newark Liberty International Airport, a private hangar gleamed like a palace of glass and steel. Inside, laughter echoed against polished aluminum and marble floors. It wasn't the laughter of ordinary men, it was the loud, careless laughter of millionaires who had never known hunger, fear, or the sting of humiliation. At the center of the group stood Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Aeronautics, a company worth billions. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair slicked back with the precision of someone who believed every strand mattered. His expensive navy blue suit was cut to perfection, his gold cufflinks catching the light as he gestured theatrically with his glass of bourbon. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a showman. Intoxicated with his own wealth. Around him lounged four of his closest associates. Richard Blackwell, heir to a chain of luxury car dealerships stretching from Chicago to Miami, puffed a cigar imported from Cuba, the smoke curling lazily toward the ceiling. Daniel Reed, a venture capitalist from Boston, wore his arrogance like cologne, thick and pungent. Anthony Vaughn, son of an oil tycoon from Texas, leaned against a leather couch, boots polished enough to reflect the chandelier above. And finally, Michael Hastings, a Wall Street trader who treated every human being as either an asset or a liability, checked his Rolex every few minutes as if time itself belonged to him. The men had just returned from a reckless competition landing Ethan's corporate jet with precision. Each of them had taken turns in the cockpit under the guidance of professional pilots, but none had managed a perfect landing. Pride wounded, Ethan needed a new form of entertainment. And when a billionaire's ego is bruised, cruelty often becomes the balm. That was when his gaze fell on her. She moved quietly near the edge of the hangar, wiping down a row of glass panels with slow, methodical motions. Her dark hair was tied back in a practical bun, strands falling loose against her temples. She wore a plain gray janitor's uniform, the name tag stitched above the chest reading Maria Lopez. Her shoes were scuffed from years of use, her rubber gloves slightly torn at the fingertips. To Ethan, she was invisible until now. A sly grin curled across his lips. He raised his voice, loud enough for the echo to reach every corner of the hangar. "Gentlemen, I've got a bet for you." The group turned toward him, eager for another spectacle. "See that cleaning lady over there?" Ethan said, pointing with his bourbon glass. "I'll wager $1,000 she doesn't even know where the ignition switch on my jet is." Laughter exploded like fireworks. Richard nearly choked on his cigar. Anthony slapped his knee. Daniel whistled. Michael, without looking up from his Rolex, smirked. "She probably doesn't even know the difference between a jet and a bus," Richard scoffed.
"Hell," Anthony added, his Texan drawl thick with mockery.
"I'd bet 50 grand she can't even start the damn engines." "She probably can't even drive a car without stalling it," Daniel sneered. Maria heard every word. After 2 years cleaning this hangar, their voices had become as familiar as the hum of jet engines. She had grown accustomed to their derision, to the way wealthy men treated her presence as background noise. But something in Ethan's tone that night, sharp, cutting, almost venomous, ignited an old fire inside her. "Hey, you!" Ethan's voice boomed, bouncing off the metal walls. He tapped his glass against the window where she worked. "Come here for a second." Maria placed the cloth gently on her cart, straightened her back, and walked toward them. Her posture was modest, her steps unhurried, but her eyes, deep brown, steady as stone, betrayed none of the storm inside her. "Yes, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice calm, professional. Ethan smirked and gestured at his friends. "We were just discussing natural talent for aviation. Tell me, have you ever flown an airplane before?" Maria paused. The weight of 100 memories pressed against her chest, screaming engines. The desert sun over Afghanistan, the sharp smell of fuel, the adrenaline of being 22 years old and trusted with lives. She could still hear the voice of her commander. "In the air, Lopez. You're not a woman, not a Latina, not poor. Your competence. And competence saves lives, but she swallowed it down. She had promised herself silence, anonymity. The world didn't need to know who she had once been. Once, sir, she replied softly. Once? Ethan repeated, bursting into laughter. His friends joined in, the sound like a pack of hyenas. Did you hear that? Once. Perfect, Daniel chuckled. Let's put her behind the controls then. Anthony leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. This'll be better than any show in Vegas. Ethan raised his hand dramatically, silencing them. He turned back to Maria, his grin widening. All right then. Let's make this interesting. If you can fly my jet ticket from here to Seattle and back without killing us, I'll marry you on the spot. What do you say? The hangar erupted in howls of laughter. Michael even stood up for the first time, shaking his head in disbelief. Marry the cleaning lady. Richard bellowed, wiping tears from his eyes. That's going to be a story for the club. Maria lowered her gaze for a moment, her fingers brushing against the hem of her uniform. They thought it was hesitation. They thought it was fear, but when she lifted her eyes again, something had shifted. There was a serenity there, cold and unwavering, that made Ethan's laughter falter for a fraction of a second. I accept, she said simply. Silence dropped over the group like a guillotine. Ethan blinked, his smirk frozen. What did you just say? I said, I accept your proposal, Mr. Carter. When do we leave? Her voice was steady, her words clear. The men shifted uncomfortably, their laughter dying in their throats. It was as if she knew something they didn't, as if she carried a secret too powerful to reveal just yet. Ethan recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. You accept? Are you serious? He turned to his friends. Gentlemen, witness this historic moment. The cleaning lady is about to teach us aviation. The men chuckled nervously, unsure whether to continue the mockery or brace for something else. Maria stood silent, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. He drained the last of his bourbon and slammed the glass onto a nearby table. Fine then. Right now. My friends will watch from the VIP lounge while you try not to kill us. But let's make it even more interesting if you fail to take off. You'll resign from this hangar. Forever. The words hit Maria like a fist to the gut. She needed this job. Every paycheck went directly to the inhalers and medications that kept her 10-year-old son, Gabriel, breathing at night. Without insurance, without steady income, his fragile lungs wouldn't survive the brutal winters of New Jersey, but she didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. I accept the terms, she said. Ethan grinned wickedly, pulling out his phone. Perfect. This will go viral in an hour. CEO challenges cleaning lady fly or be fired, Richard chuckled, already imagining the ridicule. This is going to be one hell of a story. Maria closed her eyes briefly, hearing her old commander's words once more. Competence does not lie. When she opened them again, her expression was resolute. When do we leave, Mr. Carter? Right now, he said, straightening his suit. My friends want a show. As Ethan led the way toward the gleaming white Gulfstream G700. The night air outside was cooler than expected, carrying with it the faint smell of jet fuel and asphalt. Floodlights illuminated the tarmac, bathing the sleek Gulfstream G700 in silver light. Its body gleamed like liquid metal, the company logo of Carter Aeronautics painted proudly across the tail. To Ethan's friends, it was a symbol of wealth and power. To Maria, it was a memory dressed in new paint. The group moved toward the plane with a mixture of excitement and mockery. Ethan strutted ahead like a king leading his court, tossing glances over his shoulder at Maria as if expecting her to falter. But she didn't. Her stride was steady, her gaze fixed on the jet dot in the VIP lounge above the hangar. Waiters in crisp uniforms hurried to prepare champagne. A few more guest socialites and investors Ethan had texted were already gathering, eager to watch what they assumed would be the humiliation of a cleaning woman. Mobile phones were out, cameras ready, the story already being written in their minds. Billionaire humbles janitor in ultimate bet. Maria walked quietly beside the aircraft, her hand brushing its surface for a fleeting second. The cool metal beneath her fingers was like an old friend's handshake. For a moment, she was no longer Maria the janitor, she was Lieutenant Lopez of the U.S. Coast Guard. 24 years old, stationed in Florida, tasked with flying reconnaissance missions across stormy seas. She had once guided a crippled C-37 back to base during a hurricane, every instrument failing, every second threatening death. She had walked away that night drenched, exhausted, but alive. And now, years later, here she was again, summoned by arrogance. "Try not to trip on the stairs," Anthony called from behind, his Texas drawl thick with amusement. His laughter mixed with the whir of cameras. Maria ignored him. She placed one foot on the metal stairway and began her climb. Each step echoed in her chest like a drumbeat. By the time she reached the top, the cabin door stood open before her, and the familiar scent of leather and electronics washed over her senses. Inside, the cabin was a palace of wealth. Cream-colored leather seats stretched in pairs, polished wood trim gleamed under recessed lighting, and a built-in bar sparkled with crystal glasses. The carpet beneath her shoes was softer than the bed in her small Newark apartment. Ethan followed her in, his grin never fading. "Go on," he said, gesturing toward the cockpit door. "Show us what you've got, Miss Lopez." Maria's hand lingered on the polished brass handle of the cockpit door. For a brief second, she saw Gabriel's face, in her mind his wide brown eyes, his fragile chest rising and falling with every breath that came too hard. He depended on her. If she failed tonight, she would lose not only her job but the fragile stability she had fought so hard to keep. But failure had never been an option for Maria Lopez, not in the Coast Guard, not in life. She opened the door and stepped inside. The cockpit was a symphony of light and precision. Digital screens glowed with standby data, switches and dials lined the panels like soldiers at attention. The faint hum of the auxiliary power unit resonated through the walls, steady and familiar. Maria's hands itched to move, to touch, to command. She slid into the captain's seat, her body fitting into it like it was made for her. For years she had denied herself this sensation, convincing herself those days were over. But now, seated here, she realized something undeniable. She was home, behind her. Ethan leaned against the doorway, smirking. Comfortable. Maria didn't look at him. Her fingers danced over the panel with muscle memory, checking battery voltage, fuel levels, hydraulic pressure. She whispered to herself, the same checklist she had once recited under enemy fire. Fuel pump on. Battery check. Avionics active. Hydraulic system engaged. The systems came alive, responding to her touch. Screens brightened, data streamed across glass displays. To Ethan, it looked like she was merely poking buttons at random. To Maria, it was the awakening of a sleeping giant. "Looks like she knows how to turn on the lights," Richard's voice called from the cabin, thick with sarcasm. Laughter followed. Maria ignored them. Her eyes scanned every gauge, every line of text. Perfect. The aircraft was ready. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I hope you know what you're doing. If you wreck this plane, you'll be paying for it with your entire life." Maria turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. Her expression was calm, but her words carried steel. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Mr. Carter. The question is, do you?" For the first time, Ethan's smile faltered. She turned back to the controls. Her hands moved with precision, engine starters engaged, ignition switch toggled, throttle adjusted. A low rumble shook the cabin as the massive Rolls-Royce engines roared to life. One after another, their vibrations running through the floor and into her bones. Gasps erupted from the cabin. Phones rose higher, recording every second. What was supposed to be a comedy was becoming something else, something unsettling. "Holy hell," Anthony whispered. She actually started it. The engine settled into a steady hum, the kind of sound that spoke of power restrained, waiting for command. Maria adjusted the avionics, checked navigation, then pressed the intercom. Her voice, calm and professional, filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and fasten your belts. We'll be departing shortly." The friends laughed nervously, but something in her tone made their laughter sound forced. It wasn't the voice of a janitor. It was the voice of authority, of someone who had spoken through radios in storms. In emergencies, when every word mattered, Ethan slid into the co-pilot's seat, though he had no real skill to offer. His grin was back, but thinner now, stretched tight. "All right, Miss Lopez, Show me what you've got. Maria placed her hands on the yoke, her fingers steady, her pulse calm. She released the parking brake and pushed the throttles forward slightly. The jet began to roll, smooth and deliberate, toward the taxiway. Outside the lounge windows, more guests had gathered, pressed against the glass as the aircraft began to move. Phones recorded, voices buzzed, bets exchanged. No one was laughing now. They were witnessing something none of them had expected. Competence. Maria guided the Gulfstream onto the taxiway with grace, her eyes flicking between instruments and runway lights ahead. The airport tower crackled through the radio, granting clearance. She responded in flawless aviation protocol, her voice confident and precise. Newark Tower. This is November 478 Alpha Mike, requesting clearance for takeoff. Runway 22 left. The reply came swiftly. N478 AM. Cleared for takeoff, runway 22 left. Winds calm, you are good to go. Maria pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared, the cabin vibrated, and the jet surged forward, accelerating down the runway. Lights blurred past the windows. Ethan's friends clutched their armrests, their laughter gone, their faces pale. Maria kept her eyes forward, calm as ever. At 150 knots, she pulled gently back on the yoke. The nose lifted, the ground fell away, and the Gulfstream soared into the night sky over New York City. The skyline glittered beneath them, Manhattan glowing like a crown of jewels. The Statue of Liberty standing proud in the harbor. Bridges stretching across black water like veins of light. Maria adjusted the flaps, retracted the landing gear and leveled the jet with precision. For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Even the engines seemed to bow to her command. Then Richard whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. Holy! She's really flying it. The cockpit smelled faintly of polished leather and jet fuel, a scent Maria Lopez hadn't inhaled in almost 10 years. For most people, that smell meant nothing more than machinery. For her, it was memory. It was nights on the deck of a Coast Guard cutter, dawn flights above turbulent seas, and the pounding adrenaline of being responsible for lives. Now, in this polished private hangar in New York, surrounded by men who thought she was nothing more than a cleaner, the scent felt like homecoming. Her hands moved across the controls instinctively. She didn't fumble. She didn't hesitate. Every switch she touched was muscle memory returning to life. Outside, Ethan Carter barked a laugh loud enough to echo through the steel structure of the hangar. Look at her, guys! She's really pressing buttons like she knows what they do. This is gold, his friends Richard Collins, heir to a Manhattan real estate empire, and Brandon Pierce, a venture capitalist with too much money and too little humility, snickered on cue. One of them muttered, "She probably thinks the throttle is a volume knob." The group roared again, their laughter bouncing off the walls, but in the corner not everyone was laughing. Tom Bradley, the hangar's senior mechanic and a Navy veteran, leaned against his toolbox, eyes narrowing. He had watched hundreds of rich brats climb into jets pretending to know what they were doing. This woman? She wasn't pretending. The rhythm of her hand movements, the exact order of her checks, it triggered something in his own long-buried training. She's not guessing, Tom murmured under his breath. What was that? Asked Lisa McKay, a young aerospace engineer who had just joined Carter Aviation's maintenance division. She had been dragged out here by curiosity and the sound of Ethan's booming voice. Tom shook his head, his gaze fixed on Maria. Just watch, you'll see. Inside the cockpit, Maria flipped the master switch and scanned the instrument panel. The displays flickered to life, bathing her face in a soft green glow. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Calm professionalism radiated from her posture. Dallas Executive Tower. This is November Charlie 472, requesting clearance for system check. Her voice, steady and precise, carried over the coms. To the untrained ear, it might have sounded like jargon. To Tom Bradley, it was gospel. His chest tightened. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She knows the com protocol." "That's military-level radio discipline," Lisa tilted her head. "But she's just a janitor," Tom gave her a sharp look. "Kid, I've flown with Coast Guard pilots. I've heard that tone before." "That's not janitor talk." Back outside, Ethan was still mocking. Listen to her. She's playing pilot on the radio. Can you believe this?
He pointed his phone at Maria through the cockpit glass.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet the cleaning lady who thinks Top Gun was a training video. His livestream chat began filling with laughing emojis and jeering comments from his rich followers. But among them, a few skeptical remarks slipped through. Wait, she used correct FAA terminology. How would she know that? Bro, that was a real call sign. Is she actually trained? Ethan ignored those. Arrogance was armor, and he wore it like steel. Maria adjusted her headset, then spoke calmly. Fuel levels, check. Hydraulic pressure, check. Electrical systems, check. Avionics, green across the board. Her hands moved in practice sequence, her breathing even. This was not the nervous fidgeting of someone out of their depth. This was ritual. This was competence. Tom Bradley couldn't stay quiet anymore. He marched over to Ethan, jabbing a finger toward the plane. You need to stop this. Ethan turned, smirking. Excuse me? That woman knows exactly what she's doing, Tom said firmly. Look at her pre-flight routine. She isn't winging it. She's trained, Brandon Pierce snorted. Trained? Please. She scrubs floors. Maybe she watched a YouTube video. No, Tom's jaw tightened. That's not something you learn from YouTube. That's drilled into you over years of service. I've seen it. She's military. The laughter wavered for just a second, a brief crack in their collective arrogance. Ethan sneered to cover it up. Military? Don't make me laugh. If she was military, why the hell would she be cleaning floors for me? Tom's answer was sharp and cold. Because life doesn't always reward people the way it should. Ethan rolled his eyes and turned back to his phone. Relax, Grandpa. This is entertainment. That's all. But inside, Maria wasn't thinking about entertaining anyone. She was thinking about Gabriel. Her son's face flashed in her mind. 10 years old. Dark curls falling into his eyes, clutching his inhaler during another late-night asthma episode. Every penny she earned went into keeping him healthy, keeping him safe. And every time someone at the hangar sneered at her, she had swallowed the insult because she couldn't afford to lose the paycheck. Tonight was different. Tonight she wasn't just Maria the janitor. Tonight she was Captain Maria Lopez, United States Coast Guard, retired. And she was about to remind them all. The engine sequence began. The twin turbofans roared to life, their deep growl reverberating across the hangar. The floor trembled beneath the onlookers' feet. Laughter faltered. Holy hell, Lisa whispered, eyes wide. She actually started it. She didn't just start it, Tom replied, awe creeping into his voice. She started it clean. Perfect sequence, no hesitation. I couldn't have done it smoother myself. Ethan forced a laugh, but his voice cracked just slightly. Anyone can push a button. Doesn't mean she can fly, but the livestream audience wasn't buying it anymore. Comments scrolled faster. Bro, that was a clean ignition. That pre-flight sounded legit. Wait. Is she ex-military? This isn't funny anymore. This is historic. Maria's hands continued their dance over the panels, her face serene. She adjusted flaps, verified altitude settings, double-checked navigation. Every step precise. Every move born of discipline. Her former commander's voice echoed in her mind. In the air, Lopez, you're not a woman or a man. You're not brown or white. You're competence. And competence does not lie. Outside, Ethan's arrogance began to chip away. He glanced at his friends, looking for reassurance. Richard tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Brandon muttered, Dude, what if she actually takes off? She won't, Ethan snapped, gripping his phone tighter. But even he didn't sound convinced. The mechanics and junior engineers had stopped working entirely. A small crowd had gathered near the glass wall of the hangar, all eyes on the jet. The janitor they had ignored for 2 years was commanding the company's most expensive aircraft like it was a bicycle. Inside, Maria keyed the radio again. Dallas Executive Tower, this is November Charlie 472. Requesting taxi clearance to runway 28 left. The response crackled back instantly. November Charlie 472. Taxi approved. Proceed via taxiway Alpha, wings 12 knots west. Runway 28 left cleared. Maria's reply was flawless. Roger Tower, taxiway Alpha to 28 left. November Charlie 472. Tom Bradley's throat went dry. That was no fluke. That was exact radio discipline. He whispered, "She's the real deal." And for the first time since this mockery had begun, Ethan Carter felt a flicker of doubt. The private jet rumbled forward, its wheels rolling across the yellow-striped taxiway with the confident rhythm of a machine in capable hands. From outside, the sound was deafening, two massive engines spooling, their roar bouncing off the concrete walls of the hangar. Every mechanic, every engineer, every clerk who had once dismissed Maria as invisible now stood frozen, watching her command the aircraft with an ease that didn't belong to a janitor. Is she really taxiing? Lisa McKay whispered, clutching the sleeve of Tom Bradley's coveralls. Tom didn't answer at first. His eyes were locked on the jet, his mind replaying his own deployments overseas. The countless times he'd seen Coast Guard or Navy pilots perform this exact ballet of precision. Finally, he said, "She's not just taxiing. She's running textbook procedure. That's a pro up there." Believe me, inside Maria held the yoke steady, her breathing calm. Her heart wasn't racing, it was focusing. Every vibration of the engine, every flicker on the instrument panel spoke to her like an old friend. Gabriel's face drifted across her mind again.
His laugh.
The way he used to line up toy planes across their tiny kitchen table, pretending to fly them with dramatic sound effects. "Mom, when I grow up, I'll fly like you did." She hadn't told him much, only that she used to fly for the Coast Guard, that she'd once saved people from storms and raging seas. She'd left out the scarier details, the gunfire from drug runners in the Caribbean, the desperate medevac missions in zero visibility, the friends who didn't make it back. He didn't need those memories. He needed a mother who was present. That's why she had left. That's why she pushed a mop in this hangar instead of wearing wings. But tonight the wings were back, her radio crackled. November Charlie 472, cleared for takeoff, runway 28 left. Wind steady at 12 knots. Good luck. Her fingers tightened on the throttle. Roger, Tower, November Charlie 472 rolling. The jet surged forward, pressing her gently into the seat. Outside, Ethan Carter raised his phone higher, his fake grin trembling. "Look, guys, she's moving it. This is gonna end in flames." But the flames never came. At 140 knots, Maria eased back on the yoke. Smoothly, gracefully, the $20 million machine lifted off the ground as though it had been waiting years for her return. The nose climbed into the sky, the city lights of Dallas shrinking below. Gasps erupted in the hangar. Lisa covered her mouth with both hands. She actually did it." "No," Tom said, awe in his voice. "She's doing it. Look at that ascent profile, smooth as glass." "I've flown with guys who couldn't make it that steady." Ethan's friends, once full of laughter, now stood in uneasy silence. Brandon Pierce muttered, "Jesus, this isn't supposed to happen." "Relax," Ethan said, though his voice cracked. "She screw up. Just wait." But Maria didn't screw up. She climbed to 5,000 feet, leveled off, and began a standard pattern turn executed with flawless precision. Her radio chatter was calm, professional, like she'd never left the cockpit. November Charlie 472, established on departure. Climbing to 350, climbing to 35,000 feet. The words rolled out naturally, like they had thousands of times before. On the ground, the live stream exploded. Comments flooded faster than Ethan could process. "She's flying cleaner than most commercial pilots. Who is this woman? Search her name, Maria Lopez, Coast Guard veteran." "Dude, Ethan Carter is done. This is humiliation in HD." The hashtags began trending. Hashtag Captain Maria. Hashtag cleaning lady no more. But Maria wasn't thinking about hashtags. Her mind slipped into the rhythm of flight. Her body remembered the missions, the time she had to hover above a sinking fishing vessel, her crew pulling half-drowned men out of the black Atlantic. The time she landed on a postage stamp runway in a hurricane to deliver insulin to a stranded village. Her commander's words echoed again. "Competence doesn't lie, Lopez. It shows itself when it matters most." And tonight, it mattered. All right, let's see what this bird can do, she whispered. Her hands danced across the controls. She banked hard left, rolling the jet into a maneuver no sane civilian would attempt. The engines howled, the wings sliced the air, and the jet carved a perfect arc across the night sky. Down in the hangar, jaws dropped. She's barrel rolling a corporate jet. Lisa gasped. That's impossible, Richard Collins blurted. That's suicide. But the jet completed the roll flawlessly, returning to level flight as though nothing had happened. Tom exhaled shakily. It's not impossible. It's extraordinary. She's flying it like it's an F-18. Ethan's phone slipped in his sweaty hands. The comments scrolling now weren't laughing, they were praising. Thousands of strangers were watching his mockery backfire in real time. Captain Lopez is a beast. This woman deserves a medal. Carter just played himself. Oh. Imagine underestimating a war hero. Maria wasn't performing for them. She wasn't performing for Ethan. She was flying because flying was in her blood. And because every sneer, every insult had lit a fire inside her. She pushed the jet into a steep climb, the city falling away in glittering grids. Her eyes stayed sharp, her breathing steady. At 20,000 feet, she leveled off again. Tower, November Charlie 472, systems nominal. Returning for landing in 17 minutes. Copy, November Charlie 472. Safe flight. Back in the hangar, Ethan's arrogance finally cracked. His face had gone pale, his jaw slack. Richard whispered, Ethan. She's not stopping. She's proving you wrong in front of the whole damn internet, Brandon added. And you filmed it. You made it go viral. Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time in years,
He felt fear not of losing money, not of losing a bet,
but of losing the illusion of superiority he'd built his entire life on. Maria began her descent, executing each procedure with the grace of someone born for the sky. On the ground, every eye was glued to the approaching lights. The engines thundered as she lined up with the runway, lowered the gear, and guided the jet down. The touchdown was silk, no jolt, no bounce. Just a whisper of rubber meeting asphalt. The crowd erupted in gasps and applause. The disbelief finally giving way to awe, Maria taxied back to the hangar, shut down the engines, and pulled off her headset. Her reflection in the dark cockpit glass looked different, stronger, freer. When she descended the stairs, silence fell. The same men who had laughed at her hours earlier now stared in mute shock. Maria looked directly at Ethan Carter. Her voice was calm, but her words cut sharper than steel. Mr. Carter, flight test complete. Any further doubts? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. His phone buzzed in his pocket, notifications from angry investors, journalists, and strangers mocking him for humiliating himself on a global stage. For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter realized money couldn't save him. Not from her. Not from the truth. Maria Lopez stood tall in the hangar, no longer invisible, no longer mocked. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a pilot, a veteran, a mother, and the woman who had just shattered the arrogance of New York's most untouchable billionaire. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Maria Lopez had never imagined that a single impulsive decision accepting Ethan Carter's arrogant challenge to fly his Gulfstream jet would turn into a storm that swept across the entire United States. The night after the flight, Dallas felt strangely quiet. Maria sat in her modest apartment on the south side of the city, Gabriel asleep in the next room. The hum of the old air conditioner the only sound cutting through her thoughts. But her phone would not stop buzzing. Every time she picked it up, there were more notifications, hundreds. Then thousands. Her story was everywhere. Clips of her calmly performing pre-flight checks. Clips of Ethan Carter mocking her, and the breathtaking footage of her takeoff had spread across TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube like wildfire. News anchors replayed the video in slow motion, narrating the moment the cleaning lady transformed into a decorated veteran pilot. Before the world's eyes, the public awakens by dawn. Major outlets were running with the headline, "From mop to cockpit, the heroic story of Captain Maria Lopez." CNN interviewed aviation experts who confirmed every detail of her flawless
takeoff.
Fox News invited veterans who spoke with tears in their eyes about the dignity she carried under humiliation. On Twitter, hashtags trended worldwide, hashtag justice for Captain Lopez, hashtag Carter crash, hashtag from cleaner to captain or retired. Admiral even posted, Maria Lopez once flew missions that kept our troops alive. Now a spoiled CEO tried to humiliate her. This isn't just arrogance, it's an insult to every man and woman who ever served. Within hours, the narrative shifted from a funny viral clip to a national reckoning on classism, racism, sexism, and corporate arrogance. Ethan Carter's world collapses meanwhile. In his glass-walled penthouse overlooking uptown Dallas,
Ethan Carter was experiencing the opposite of fame.
his PR team had abandoned their weekend, frantically trying to spin the story. But no amount of corporate gloss could erase the raw footage of his sneer, his mocking laugh, and his words, "If she can even start the engine, I'll marry her." Phone calls from board members poured in. Contracts worth millions were canceled in real time. Carter Aviation's stock, once a symbol of luxury and dominance in the private jet market, began free falling. At 9 a.m., CNBC reported, Carter Aviation loses 22% in value within 24 hours after CEO, Ethan Carter, humiliates decorated veteran Maria Lopez. Ethan's lawyers warned him, investors were
Considering a class action lawsuit, his father's old
friendsmen who had once toasted Ethan's visionary leadership at the Dallas Country Club suddenly refused to return his calls. Overnight, the king of Carter Aviation had become its greatest liability, Maria's quiet strength, but Maria herself stayed grounded. She still woke up early to prepare Gabriel's breakfast oatmeal with honey, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. Her son had school, and for Maria, nothing was more important than maintaining stability for him. When Gabriel looked up at her with wide, curious eyes and asked, "Mom, why are people saying your name on YouTube?" Maria smiled softly, "Because they finally saw what I used to do before I worked at the hangar." "You mean, when you were in the Coast Guard?" She nodded, ruffling his hair. "That's right. But don't worry. No matter what happens, I'm still just Mom." Still, inside her, a storm brewed. Years of silence, of suppressing her identity, of cleaning floors while men like Ethan Carter dismissed her worth, it all came rushing back. For the first time in a long time, Maria felt something like freedom. Flashbacks of service news reporters began digging into her past. And within days, Maria's service record became public. 12 years in the U.S. Coast Guard, 3 tours supporting naval operations in the Persian Gulf, decorated with the Distinguished Flying Cross and Air Medal, credited with evacuating 47 soldiers under fire in Afghanistan during a joint mission. Interviews with former crewmates painted a picture of a woman who had nerves of steel. One described her landing a C-130 on a dirt strip in Kandahar under mortar fire. Another recalled her calm voice during a mid-air emergency when an engine failed. "Maria Lopez isn't just a good pilot," said Colonel James Whitaker, retired. "She's the kind of leader you follow into hell because you know she bring you back alive." The human side, but what captured the public even more was not just her heroism, it was her humanity. A profile in the New York Times told the story of how she left her military career after her wife, Elena, was killed during active duty overseas. Alone with a toddler, Maria made the painful choice to step away from aviation and take lower-paying civilian jobs too, prioritize her son's safety and health. Pictures of Maria pushing a mop in her janitor's uniform juxtaposed with her in full flight gear went viral. To many Americans, she became a symbol of resilience, sacrifice, and dignity. The boycott begins. By the end of the week, Carter Aviation was facing a crisis. No PR firm could contain. Veteran organizations announced a nationwide boycott of the company. Influencers urged followers never to buy services from a corporation that mocks the very heroes who protect this country. Celebrities weighed in, actors, musicians, even athletes. NBA star Marcus Green tweeted, "Maria Lopez is a hero. Ethan Carter is a clown. I know who I'd rather fly with." Within days, Carter Aviation's Dallas headquarters was surrounded by protesters carrying signs, "Respect our veterans, heroes, not janitors, fire Carter." Reporters swarmed the building, hungry for any sign of Ethan. Maria faces the spotlight. Maria, meanwhile, was thrust into a spotlight she never sought. Journalists camped outside her apartment complex. Talk shows begged for interviews. Job offers arrived by email from regional airlines to major corporations, but Maria refused most appearances. She didn't want to become a circus act, nor did she want to uproot her son's life too suddenly. Still, there were moments when she allowed herself to speak. On a 60 Minutes interview, she looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm not ashamed of the years I spent cleaning floors. Honest work is never shameful. What's shameful is judging someone by their job title, their skin color, or their gender instead of their character." That clip alone was shared millions of times. Teachers played it in classrooms. Churches quoted it in sermons. It became a rallying cry. Behind closed doors, Ethan Carter, however, spiraled further. His board of directors called an emergency session in New York. Patricia Green, a formidable woman with silver hair and a reputation for dismantling egos, led the charge. "Mr. Carter," she said coldly across the mahogany table, "in less than 1 week, your actions have wiped out 40 years of this company's reputation. You are hereby suspended as CEO pending further review." Ethan exploded. "You can't do this. This is my company." "No," Patricia replied. "This was your father's company. You are just lucky enough to inherit it. And now you've destroyed it." For the first time in his privileged life, Ethan Carter felt something foreign: fear. Maria's turning point back in Dallas. Maria's life was changing too quickly to process. Neighbors stopped her in grocery stores to shake her hand. Veterans sent her letters thanking her for representing them with dignity. One envelope arrived with no return address, just a note inside that read, "I was one of the soldiers you flew out of Kandahar. You saved my life. Now I get to see my daughter grow up. Thank you, Captain Lopez." Maria wept quietly in her kitchen as she read it. Gabriel walked in, puzzled. "Mom, why are you crying?" She pulled him close. "Because someone reminded me why I made all those sacrifices. And it was worth it." The offer. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Robert Kingsley, CEO of Apex Air, Carter Aviation's fiercest competitor, invited Maria to a downtown Dallas hotel for a private meeting. Sitting across from her, he laid out an offer that stunned her. Head of Apex's Special Operations and Training Division. $320,000 annual salary plus bonuses. Full health insurance for Gabriel. A scholarship fund guaranteeing his college education. Maria hesitated. "Why me?" Kingsley smiled. "Because America saw who you are. And we want that kind of integrity leading our pilots. You didn't just fly a plane, you reminded people what leadership looks like." Ethan Carter destroyed his company in 1 weekend. "You've built a movement in the same time." A hero emerges. By the time Maria walked out of that meeting, she knew her life would never be the same. That night, she stood on her balcony, the Dallas skyline glittering in the distance. Gabriel ran out to join her, clutching a toy airplane. "Are you gonna fly again, Mom?" he asked. Maria knelt down, meeting his hopeful eyes. "Yes, baby. I think I am. But this time, it won't just be for me. It'll be for us. For everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough." She kissed his forehead, whispering a promise. "We're going to rise higher than they ever imagined." And as fireworks from a downtown festival lit up the night sky, Maria Lopez finally felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. For the first time since Elena's death, she allowed herself to dream again. Maria Lopez never asked to become a national symbol. She had only wanted to do her job, take care of her son Gabriel, and live quietly after years of military service. But fate had different plans. The weeks following the viral incident grew into something much bigger than Maria, Ethan Carter, or even Carter Aviation. It became a national conversation about dignity, equality, and the real meaning of American strength. The public spotlight intensifies by now. Maria's face had appeared on every major news network. NBC called her the pilot who shattered stereotypes. The Washington Post published a front-page feature titled, "Maria Lopez, From Humiliation to Heroism in 48 Hours." Ordinary Americans embraced her story. In small towns from Ohio to Montana, Veterans gathered in VFW halls and raised toasts in her honor. College students painted murals of her flying a jet with the caption, "Never underestimate a working mother." Churches used her story in sermons. Teachers assigned essays about her courage. High school girls began telling each other, "Be like Captain Lopez." Maria received letters from across the country: farmers in Iowa, nurses in New York, single mothers in Los Angeles. Each message carried the same theme: "You gave us hope." Ethan Carter's fall from grace. If Maria was rising, Ethan Carter was plummeting. By mid-month, Carter Aviation's headquarters in Dallas looked like a fortress under siege. Protesters gathered daily. Reporters camped outside the glass doors, waiting for a glimpse of the disgraced CEO. The board of directors met again in New York. This time, the verdict was final. Ethan Carter was stripped of his title, removed from his position, and forced to surrender his shares. At a fraction of their value, the man who once swaggered through boardrooms in designer suits now found himself alone in a downtown apartment he didn't even own, just a temporary rental, while creditors circled like vultures. Behind Ethan's mask, for the first time, Ethan felt what Maria had known for years: invisibility. The phone calls stopped. His so-called friends at the Dallas Country Club no longer invited him to dinners. Even his longtime girlfriend, a socialite more interested in his last name than his heart, packed her bags and left. At night, he sat at his window, staring at the city lights he once ruled over. He replayed the video that had destroyed him, his own mocking laugh, his cruel words, and Maria's calm, dignified response. It dawned on him, too late, that the world had seen more in her silence than in his power. Maria accepts a new path. Meanwhile, Maria faced her own life-changing decision. Apex Air's offer remained on the table, generous beyond anything she could have dreamed of. Still, she hesitated, not because she doubted her abilities, but because accepting meant stepping fully into a life she had long put aside. She turned to Gabriel one evening. He was sitting at the kitchen table working on a drawing for school. Crayons scattered across the wood surface. "Gabriel," she asked gently, "how would you feel if Mom flew planes again?"
He looked up, eyes shining.
Like a superhero. That was all the answer she needed. Maria accepted the job. Apex Air's historic announcement. 3 weeks later, in a grand press conference at the Omni Dallas Hotel, Robert Kingsley, CEO of Apex Air, introduced Maria Lopez to the world as the company's new Director of Special Operations and Training. Flashes from cameras filled the room. Journalists crowded forward. Maria, wearing a dark navy suit with her hair neatly pulled back, stood behind the podium with quiet strength. She spoke not with anger, not with arrogance, but with grace. "For 2 years, I pushed a mop to support my son. I'm not ashamed of that. Honest work is never beneath anyone. What matters is how you carry yourself, with dignity, resilience, and respect. I stand here not as a symbol of revenge, but as proof that character cannot be erased. We all deserve to be seen for who we truly are." The applause thundered. That night, millions watched the broadcast. For many, it wasn't just a corporate announcement, it was a cultural turning point. Gabriel's pride back home. Gabriel became somewhat of a celebrity at his elementary school. Teachers asked him to share about his mom in class. Friends pointed at the TV when her face appeared. At first, the boy felt shy. But one day, during a school assembly, he stood up and said, "My mom always told me dignity is more important than money. She showed me that even if people laugh at you, you can still prove them wrong. She's my hero." The entire auditorium clapped, and Gabriel beamed with pride. The echo of justice, but justice wasn't finished. Ethan Carter tried to salvage his image by giving a half-hearted apology on social media. It backfired instantly. Comments flooded in. "Too little, too late. You mocked a veteran?" "Ethan, no apology can fix that. Enjoy unemployment, business." Schools began teaching case studies on the Carter incident, analyzing how arrogance and bias could destroy not only reputations but entire corporations. Meanwhile, Maria's story appeared in leadership seminars, women's conferences, and military academies, a journey across America over the next year. Maria traveled across the country for speaking engagements. She spoke in Atlanta, San Diego, Chicago, and Boston. Everywhere she went, crowds filled auditoriums. Veterans embraced her. Young women asked for selfies. She told them all the same truth. Your worth is not defined by what others see. It's defined by what you know you carry inside. Her words resonated deeply, especially in communities often overlooked: immigrants, single parents, working-class families. Ethan's final defeat: 1 year after the incident, Carter Aviation was sold off in pieces. The once mighty company Ethan had inherited was no more. Ethan himself lived quietly,
taking odd consulting jobs, his name permanently tied to disgrace.
Occasionally, someone recognized him at an airport or a restaurant. Whispers followed him everywhere. Isn't that the guy who mocked the cleaning lady who was actually a captain? Each time, Ethan felt the sting of humiliation. In the end, his legacy wasn't wealth or innovation, it was arrogance undone by truth. Maria's true victory. Maria, on the other hand, thrived. She didn't just work at Apex Air, she transformed it. Under her leadership, the company launched a veteran-to-pilot program, offering training and employment for former service members. She personally mentored dozens of young pilots, many of them women and minorities who had never been given a chance. Within 2 years, Apex became the most respected aviation company in America. Their slogan, inspired by Maria's words, was printed on billboards nationwide: dignity in every flight. A legacy beyond the skies. But Maria's greatest legacy wasn't in boardrooms or cockpits. It was at home, in the quiet moments with Gabriel. She tucked him into bed each night, read him stories, and reminded him of the lesson her life had taught. People may underestimate you, Gabriel. They may laugh, doubt, or dismiss you. But that says nothing about you. It says everything about them. Never forget who you are. Gabriel would nod, clutching his toy airplane. I won't, Mom. Closing reflections years later. Maria reflected on it all in a podcast interview. The greatest revenge isn't to humiliate those who tried to break you. It's to build something greater than they ever imagined possible. Ethan Carter tried to reduce me to a joke, but he only reminded me of who I really was. And because of that, I rose higher than even I thought I could. The host asked her, "Do you forgive him?" Maria smiled. Forgiveness is not for him. It's for me. And yes, I forgive him. Because I'm too busy flying higher to carry that weight. The final lesson. Maria Lopez's story became more than a viral moment. It became a lesson passed down through classrooms, households, and communities. Never underestimate someone based on appearances. Honest work carries dignity, no matter the job. Resilience and character outlast arrogance and privilege. And so, the woman once mocked as a cleaning lady soared higher than any insult, leaving behind a legacy of hope, courage, and true greatness.